There was a video that came on X yesterday that I saw that was gaining a lot of traction. It's not the first video of its kind. I have no doubt it won't be the last of its kind, but the video infuriates me for the obvious reason, but also for a very not so obvious reason. And it's the not so obvious reason I think we're going, is the center, the epicenter of this space is today. The video is essentially the typical video where a child is addressing the school board, complaining about boys having permission and access to the girls' locker rooms. So begging essentially in front of the school board, complaining this is wrong, you're infringing my rights. I should feel safe at school. The typical one where they gain traction every now and then, every few weeks, every couple months, and they are met with copious amounts of applause, lots and lots of praise, lots of comments on their courage and bravery. And I don't want to detract from that, because certainly for a child to stand up and say it, that's quite, that is quite brave of them to do so. And, the other end of the spectrum then when it's met with outrage that we've got to that state, that this event is actually happening. It's outrage. Again, rightfully so. No reactions that people have are actually wrong. I don't think that. Right? I think what infuriates me is the obvious reason that this girl in this video and any other child in any other video that's similar. What infuriates me is that they're in that position. Absolutely, fully agree with everything everyone's saying. I fully agree with what she's saying and how and what the commenters are saying and feeling. But the thing that infuriates me the most, and I've never seen anyone say it, I've never seen anyone in the comments, nobody who's posting about these videos, the accounts are going viral, the post is going viral. Nobody is ever saying it. But the fact that our children are there is a concrete failure in our parenting, right? As a father of a daughter, I am watching this girl pour her heart out in a really, for lack of a better word, professional manner, very calm, very concise, very articulate. But she is telling these adults in her life, the school board, whatever parents are there, how unsafe she feels and how unsafe she is, and how her rights are being abused, essentially. Her rights are being stripped from her, taken from her. As a father, how is your daughter in that position? How has it got to that position? How has it gone all the way to this school board meeting? Right? And it's the exact same case for when parents go up. In essence, what the video is doing is someone is standing up to standing up to address the school board, or whatever equivalent they are, higher ups in the running of the school, and they are begging the school to stop doing it. That's what they're doing. If as a father, if I was in this position, if my daughter said, well, oh, I got to go to school and get changed and undressed in front of a boy, I don't feel safe. Best case scenario, they're watching her. Worst case scenario, something life altering, life destroying happens. As a father, I can't understand why these girls are even up there talking to the school board. It's a complete failure on our behalf as parents and on behalf of every adult in their life. Because for me, it's firstly, it's too late. To get to this stage is far too late. If she's at this stage, or if a parent is at this stage, it means we have this. We're talking specifically with the video. It's trans athletes in the locker rooms. It's boys in the girls' locker rooms getting changed, right? But there's been several instances of these types of videos where pornographic content has been in the school. Sexually explicit or sexually mature themes have been discussed with children who are much too young. There's a very sexual overarching theme to this. And to get to this point, firstly, the school already thinks it's fine because they would never have done it if they didn't, right? So you're complaining, you're begging, you're pleading with the institution that thinks this is fine in the first place. They're not going to feel your sympathy. They're not going to feel sympathy for you. They're not going to empathize with you, particularly in the case of sexually explicit material, pornographic material, that type of thing. What we need to realize is, with our children, once they're exposed to it, there's no unexposing them to it. We can't reverse the clock and say, well, I pulled my kid out of the school as soon as I found out they were doing it. That's great. That is the right form, the right path to take. But your child has already seen it. Your child has already been exposed to it. There's no taking it out of their mind. There's no pulling that information out anymore. It's already been exposed. So it's already much, much too late to this at this stage. But the overarching theme and the theme of the spaces today, really, and it is the most dangerous side effect of public school. Well, let's strip education out of it. Let's strip socialization out of it. The most dangerous side effect of public school is it convinces parents to default to the authority of the school when it comes to their children. It is an insidious mindset that develops within parents who access the public school system. And I'm sure there's plenty of dads, plenty of mothers who will say, well, I don't do this, I don't do that, and try to counteract that. But all those people who are championing that girl on that video and all other videos going, yeah, you should be doing this. No, you shouldn't. That's wrong. You should be pulling your children from school. You should, if you're complaining, this girl is complaining, and rightfully so, but if she's complaining, it means she feels a genuine, she feels the sexual assault is a genuine possibility. Imagine sending your child into a place where sexual assault was a genuine possibility. Oh, because I can't pull them out of school. Well, that's not how it works. Oh, we can't homeschool. Oh, we both work, or we don't have the time to homeschool. Your kid could be sexually assaulted. Either you believe that or you don't. If you don't believe that a boy in the girls' locker room is a problem, then there you go. That's your, unfortunately, that's a tragedy on your behalf of your parenting. But if you believe she is right to be complaining about this, how can you look yourself in the face as a father and say, oh, well, it's too hard to homeschool, or we just don't have the time, or she loves school, really? In any other scenario, you'd never send your child into a situation where they could be sexually assaulted. You believed they could be sexually assaulted. Paul, I'm going to let you jump in because I'm hogging the speaker right now.
Well, let me just first say that I share your livid rage. Dads, get your priorities right. What you said before there about this sort of behavior convinces the parents, so you said something like it convinces the parents to default to the authority of the school or the state. And furthermore, even more damagingly, it teaches the kids to do the same. So this is an intergenerational issue, and prevention is always better than cure. And just to flesh out a little bit what you were talking about there, in my mind, it's a case of there's some decision that's already been made, and then we skirt around the fringes debating the implementation of that. We need to actually re-ask the fundamental questions. As you said, why are we in this position in the first place? Why do our underage minor daughters in particular need to be the ones that front up into these uncomfortable situations and present their own muscle without the life experience, without the assertion that should come from a mature age, responsible adult male parent? It just boggles me. There's a quote from Martin Luther King that goes something like, freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Boils my blood when I hear these platitudes from parents as well. Oh, they really like school. Translation, I just couldn't be bothered to put the preservation of my daughter's sexual pristine status up on the pedestal and derive every other behavior from that. And to be blunt, I can't believe I share the world with people who think like that so casually. So please don't feel like you're alone in being outraged about that. I think that's actually quite a healthy response. And if I may go on a little bit more, I did a little bit of research around this before jumping on the space and found that there are actual tangible benefits from this. And I don't know if data will land home on what is effectively quite an emotional response that, I'll throw it in anyway. There was a 2023 meta-analysis from the US National Library of Medicine. It was called Exposure to Sexual Content and Problematic Sexual Behaviors in Children and Adolescents, brackets, child abuse and neglect. There's your first clue. And ultimately, that's what we're talking about here. When we're blurring the lines between particularly underage students in schools and what they're permitted to do in locker rooms and so forth, this is the topic of discussion. So the study there, or the meta-analysis, it analyzed 27 studies from 16,000 children from 5 to 18 globally, so around the world. And it looked at the link between exposure to sexual content. And there have been many references to this. This is exactly what happens when you blur the lines in locker rooms and so forth, genitals exposed and all sorts of sexual acts. And they looked at the correlation with the likelihood of minors engaging in PSB, they call it, problematic sexual behavior. And the key findings are somewhat unsurprising in my mind, but they found that children exposed to non-violent sexual material, like just standard pornography, were 1.8 times more likely to engage in problematic sexual behaviors compared to those not exposed. Furthermore, they're 2.5 times more likely if they're exposed to live sexual content, which is exactly what we're talking about here. And again, unsurprisingly, girls are far more susceptible to it. So this problematic sexual behaviors, well, what does that mean? Well, it's everything downstream in your adult life, such as sexualized play in early years and aggressive coercive behavior. It's really life-altering stuff. Yeah, children who see sexual material and don't have this sexual provenance or autonomy guarded by a strong male influence in the household and in the society are far more likely to act out in sexually inappropriate ways for their whole life. This is where the conventional term daddy issues comes from that we kind of throw around casually almost as a laugh, but it's a very real thing. So yeah, I share your outrage and I'm doing a bit of mic hogging myself, so I might relinquish for you.
No, I mean, half of me wants to apologize and half of me doesn't, because I said the purpose of the space was to analyze the most dangerous side effects of public school. You know, the defaulting of authority to the school by parents. But the other purpose of the space is to give me some space to vent air my grievances, because it's been a long time. Personally, it's been a long time coming, because these videos, like I said, they creep up every now and then. They gain notoriety. They go quite viral every now and then. And every time I don't see one person calling out how they've gone too far, how this kid's father or this person is failing the children because they're still keeping them in the school system that's willingly exposing them to this, that thinks doing this is a good idea, or at the bare minimum, an acceptable idea, not a dangerous idea. And I don't know if you guys follow, his name is an account on X. His name is Jonathan Prescott, Homeschool Life LLC. Great account, but he posted something recently about the beast that is the public education system, right? And it's many people think they can fight the public education system. And this is exactly what these people are doing right there in those videos. They feel like they are fighting. And I think that's one of the dangerous things there. You know, when you get sort of that dopamine rush, that adrenaline rush, where you're like, well, I'm standing up for something that's right and I'm doing really well. But in actuality, you're not accomplishing all that much. But you're getting the fix of feeling like you're accomplishing quite a bit. But anyway, he said, and it's a sentiment I've held for a while, you can't fight the beast. It is far too big for any one person or any group of people to fight. The only way you kill the beast is to starve it. You have to stop sending your children there. You will not fight it. You will not change it. You have to stop feeding the beast. And when you stop giving the beast its food, then change can occur. Then they will learn. If all those parents who supported or were affected by that girl, just that girl in that school, said, no, my kids aren't going back to that school until you sort this out, I mean, that would make waves, right? I mean, personally, I'd never send them back there again, because it's still an institution that thought that was okay. I mean, if we went to any other place in society, if I went to a restaurant and I thought, well, if I go to this restaurant, there's a chance my daughter might be sexually assaulted. Do you think we're going to ever go there as a family? No, we never will go there as a family. If I thought, well, actually, last time we went to that restaurant, even if you played naivety and ignorance, last time I went to that restaurant, one of the staff showed some porn to my 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old kid. And when I confronted them about it, the restaurant didn't really apologize or do anything about it. Should I go there and keep giving them my money, keep giving them keep running the risk of it happening again? No, you'd be crazy to. In fact, you could argue it'd be abusive of the parents to do so. It'd be abusive of the parents to place their children into that dangerous environment and position, certainly knowing now what they do know. But here's the thing, right? Let's put the rage aside and actually talk about the most dangerous aspect of the public education system. And it really is this subjugation of authority. If you can look at it from a purely secular perspective, in the sense that it really is undermining parental authority, and not just undermining parental authority, but convincing the parents to allow their authority to be undermined, right? Or to role reversal. And I know people who talk about it from a biblical perspective, in the sense that the biblical hierarchy is God, parents, child. And what it's actually doing is skewing that, even trying to usurp God, because, religious, for good or for ill, religious connotations aren't allowed within the public school system in the US anyway. So there's this really insidious mindset. And the worst part about it is it's never direct. That's how the manipulation takes hold. And it's the only way, you see this type of technique used across society, across history, because there's too many parents to control by the school. There are too many parents and too many children for the school to control. So they will use manipulative, underhanded tactics like this to convince you to control yourselves, right? You immediately find yourself saying, as a parent of the school system, the school said this, the rules of the school are this, regardless of whether the rules are just or moral or right. We convince our children to obey the authority of the school simply because they are the school, whether they're right or they're wrong. And we have to go back to this leadership within the home and think, well, does the school make decisions for my family, or do I make decisions for my family? Do my wife and I make decisions for the family, or is the decision decided by the school? Because that's what we do. That's what we're thinking here. And there's a phrase that does the rounds a couple of times, and it's I don't co-parent with the state. And I said that, and I love to say it. It's a powerful message. But I fully believe if you're engaging in the public education system, you actually do co-parent with the state, and there's no way around it, because the school has a huge influence on your daily lives and the decisions you make. And you don't actually have the autonomy over your children that you think you do. Unless you're willing to pull them out, you really don't. You still have to abide by those rules. And if we take out, I think you said it best as well, Paul, is that the danger is it's intergenerational manipulation. So all these parents that are commenting on these videos, that are present at these school board meetings, all of those parents were children that were in the public education system, or I'm confident the vast majority were. And what lesson did they learn when they went to school? The same lesson their children are learning, the same lesson they're encouraging their children to learn by going to those board meetings. If I was using the public school system, and my kids were attending it, and my daughter was attending it, and she said, "Oh, there's boys getting naked in front of me," or "There's boys in the room when I have to get naked," I wouldn't be going complaining to the school. I wouldn't be, or going so far as to go all the way to a board level complaint to the school. She wouldn't be in that building. It's dangerous, but we've convinced ourselves to look the other way. We've been convinced by the school to be able to do that. If we take perhaps a less sinister approach, and this is where it happens, mostly, and it's most subtle in its influence, is bullying. Right? What is your first response if your child comes home from school and they say, "Oh, I was bullied today. Oh, I'm being bullied. This kid is picking on me, calling me names, physically violent, and it's been happening for weeks." What's the first response from most parents? Well, let's go tell the school. Let's go see what they're going to do, because they're in charge of you and I'm not. I want to see how they're going to solve your problem, because I can't solve your problem. So we're going to see what they can do. In other words, I'm powerless in this situation to help you, so let's go speak to the people who can. Right there, that right there. And we all know, realistically, the school does very little, whether it's because they don't have the capacity or they don't care, right? They just don't have the resource to deal with something like that. It's not their goal. Their goal isn't to make sure children aren't bullied. Their goal is for, the metric they're measured by is not by bullying within the school, it's test scores, right? It's school attendance. That's what they're concerned with. So what happens then? We're going down the line now. Do parents even then go, "Well, I'm going to take this into my own hands now, and I'm going to resolve the situation"? No, they go, "Well, let's go tell the school it didn't work and see what their next plan is." And so you go through this stupid cycle of your children essentially witnessing you submit to the school's leadership every single time. And all the while, your child is enduring this trauma at the expense of your lack of leadership, right? So it's really sinister, subtle, and you do it. You're the biggest player in it. You as parents are the biggest player in that insidious, the installation of that malware within your brain. Paul, do you want to jump in?
Malware in the brain. I love it. I love that restaurant analogy you said before. It truly is quite appropriate to draw that parallel. You go to a restaurant where your child was previously sexually assaulted there, but hey, the steak was tasty. What hierarchy of priorities does that model to your children? That subjugation to authority is just so insidious, and that godparent-child hierarchy that you described is being chipped away at. The state is the new deity, and you see it pop up everywhere. So where does authority actually come from? Why are we delegating this away? Does it come from power or principles? I think that's a fundamental question. If authority comes from power, then that would describe the kind of things we're seeing. Well, I'm powerless, the state is powerful, so, that's the conclusion. But if it comes from principles, the kind of things that theology teaches us or any other sort of moral framework, then we are empowered to go against someone that, or an entity or a body that is large, and just go our own separate ways, because that's what our principles dictate. And it's only a matter of time before co-parenting with the state steps on something that you love yourself. There's an end state to the road that you go down. And we see that start to roll out in legislation everywhere. That I maintain that front door on the house is the ultimate last bastion of familial sovereignty. And the state is firmly knocking on that door. And we see it in the quote unquote education system. We see it everywhere in this country now. We've had, for instance, an under 16 social media ban passed through federal parliament under the guise of protecting children. Mind you, it's only the social media platforms that are being targeted, not Pornhub, not the porn sites. So I would argue that it's not at all for protecting the children. But to my point, I've heard parents in real life, in my own circles, on the periphery, mind you, that have said things like, well, I don't know much about this legislation, but it sounds like a good idea because I don't think what's on social media is particularly appropriate. Why are you putting tablets in your young children's hands then? And then deciding that the state is the one to police what they should see. Why is that not the question being asked? And again, I think it goes back to translation. Well, the kids are too noisy and difficult for me to entertain and educate. Otherwise, it's just easier to placate that we're putting a tablet in front of them and then delegate how that's managed to some other, body of authority. But, tiptoe, creep, creep, they've got the foot in the front door, haven't they? And then the state starts walking in and making other more granular decisions around the household. And you've lost total sovereignty over your own family tree, effectively. And I don't know what more to say to make this more relevant and urgent in the minds of parents and particularly fathers. I don't know why we've lost this, what I think should be quite an innate desire, a drive to protect and preserve your own offspring, particularly girls, at the cost of everything else, including and especially your own level of comfort or your own preservation even. Yeah, going back to basics, the fundamental question of have some self-respect, take some ownership of the direction of your own family and your own offspring, and they'll love you for it.
I think you just drew a very exceptional parallel to what we're discussing in terms of that social media ban. I'm sure it's applauded across the country because parents will say, well, great, because it's not safe for children. So there absolutely should be a ban. Well, guess what? As a parent, you can just not let your children on social media. You don't need the state to tell you that. But because it's difficult, that's the thing. We're accustomed, or we're trained against the difficulty. We're trained to run from difficulty. My kids are 11 and 9. No, they don't have social media, right? But I know some of the kids that we know do at that age and a little bit older. And I know the conversations will get tougher. And I know the boundaries will feel tighter to my children as they get older. And my wife and I stand firm in our decision to prohibit social media, likely at least until the age of 16, within our house. And so, but that's what being a parent is about. But we have this herd mentality where if one person goes against the grain, they're conditioned to feel really insecure about it. And if it's particularly difficult when, certainly in the public school system, right? If your kid goes into public school, peer pressure is a huge thing. I'm not here to talk about the intense negatives of the peer pressure culture within public school, but it's a very real reality and it contributes to this discussion. Because if your child was to go into public school and have no social media, so around the age 13, 14, right? And almost every other child in that school year has social media. I mean, that is a battle, right? That's a monumental battle for you as parents. But it's also kind of, from one perspective, it's kind of cruel to your children because the rules you have as parents, and you could say, well, I'm being cruel to be kind, but it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, I know, and I agree with you that they shouldn't have it, but you are sticking them in a situation where they'll be socially ostracized for not, right? And that's not something a 13, 14-year-old is mentally, emotionally, or spiritually equipped to deal with, right? They're not equipped to deal with a battle on that scale that you're forcing them to deal with, right? Because you've chosen to access the public education system. And again, I imagine some parents do feel that way, and that's why they end up giving social media. But the point is parental sovereignty, right? Stop waiting on the state to make parental decisions for you. It leaves the public education system. And look, where are we now? And I may have brought up the whole COVID thing for the last couple of pieces, but it feels really relevant all the time. The point being that when you're installed with this malware all the way through the public education system, when you leave the public education system, that malware doesn't leave your brain as a result of leaving the system. It's already ingrained. That's why you have parents who repeat the cycle with their children, but that's why you also have then adults that are conditioned to default to the authority of the state on all things. Right? And I'm not going to say that the state is wrong in all things, but it is absolutely a decision. Most decisions are absolutely something families should make on their own, whether it's in line with what the state chooses to suggest, or even, I mean, I even believe legislate, right? I mean, and of course there's consequences to that, but I believe that's still the family's decision to make. Go ahead, Paul.
You're right. We're trained to run from difficulty and we should embrace it. And, what does that look like? Well, as you've been elegantly articulating there, controlling the environment and not begging the power structure of the day not to use its power. And some of these difficulties come from the abrasion or the discrepancies between the principles within the family and the looseness of the peers that your children come across in the state system. And that's where you get the struggles like, well, okay, I'll relinquish that, I'll lose that. I'm fighting for what I've already lost with access to social media. Putting them in an environment where their peers and the parents of their peers are actively living the principles you adopt in your own home is a far better situation, because everyone can see that you're in a group of people who realize that they've voluntarily adopted a set of morally grounded principles and are living by it. And it's a self-reinforcing structure. To those who say, well, I can't educate my kids at home, the worst homeschooled kids would still be better than what's being produced by these, mind mush factories in the state system. And you'll get better, and you'll develop the relationship with your children. They'll learn one of the most important things that school can never teach you, and that is that their parents are invested in them. You're educating your children, that their parents are actively involved in their well-being. And literacy and numeracy and history and all the other topics are downstream from that fundamental piece of knowledge that is instilled in the minds of your children, and they'll love you for it. And you spoke of the malware of the mind that's installed by the state. It's even more nefarious than that, because the antivirus is also installed by the state, and it eradicates any little seed that you may be trying to plant in your child's brain in the small amount of time that you have them after the state does, because the antivirus incorrectly detects that as erroneous. Yeah, and that's then a lifelong battle to try and uproot.
Absolutely. I'm pushing the conversation a bit forward, right? There's a point I've got here in my notes about what you're effectively communicating to your kids. And I touched on it earlier, where it's, you're essentially saying, I can't protect you. And as a father, that's got to be, the gut punch of your life, right? So tell your children, yeah, my role is protector. I can't fulfill that. Or worse, I won't, right? I won't do the difficult things in order to fulfill that, right? So, what are we doing? We're saying, we say, well, you have to go to school because you have to do this. The two options there are either, you're telling them you're incapable of educating them, of safeguarding them, or you don't want to educate them or safeguard them, right? In those situations. And that is what you're actually communicating them. And that whether no parent's ever going to say it in those words. They're going to say, well, we can't, you have to go to school. We can't pull you out. We can't, yada, yada, yada. But that's not that's not the message your kids internalize, right? It's such a dangerous, it's a dangerous dichotomy that exists between you and the school, because whilst you're communicating that you can't and won't do what's best for them, the school is essentially communicating, yeah, we'll do what's best for you, and this is what's best for you, because I've said it's what's best for you. I know you may disagree, but I don't. That is something that shatters the trust within a family unit and completely decimates the strength that family unit holds. As a father, again, I'm going to talk, I'm going to let the rage flow in some cases, but as a father, I can't fathom not being able to safeguard my daughter from sex, or not telling her that I don't want to, or it's too difficult to. That is absurd to me, right? It's absurd to me, the fathers, I'm telling you, the fathers of adult women, as college, those girls that go to college, right, who compete against men in women's sports. As a father, I wouldn't even stand for that, right? I would be vocal about that. I get that adults can make their own decisions, but I would go down swinging in that argument. It would not be an argument I would ever concede, right? And I would like to think that the 18 years I'd spent raising my daughter, she would just share the same opinion. And even if there was some doubt, she would trust me enough that she would accept what my wishes were in that scenario, because that's literally what we're telling them. it's too difficult to safeguard you from boys changing in your locker room, and you'll have to go to school and feel like you could be sexually assaulted. And I mean, there is no hill greater that I will die on than that, right? It's we need to wake up. People need to wake up for so many reasons, but the fact that these videos gain so much traction it fuels my rage in that respect, because like I said, no parent on there, no fathers on there ever go, do you know what? Something's really wrong here that it's got to that state, right? It's really wrong that all these parents are relying on the school to solve the problem they didn't even think was a problem to begin with, right? And these children are standing up for fear, and also for fear of being labeled transphobic, right? They're going in to and martyring themselves on this altar of state leadership, right? Of school authority. And if we can't, to tie back to that sort of hierarchical chain of command, with the family and with God, if you as parents are saying to your child, well, actually, we believe the hierarchy in the world is biblical. It goes God, us, you, and we're there to safeguard you. Well, why would they ever trust your opinion? It starts with that finite scenario in which the boys are getting changed in the locker room with girls, and it bleeds out into everything you will ever say to your child. Because what you're doing is shattering trust. You are saying, and I've said it again, and I'll say it lots of times more before the spaces ends. You are saying, it is too difficult to keep you safe. You can't, even though I tell you as a parent, I will do whatever I can to keep you safe. As your father, I will do whatever I can. I would kill a man if he was trying to hurt you. Well, guess what? There's a risk that this might happen now. Oh, your daughter feels like there's a real risk this might happen now. What are you doing? What's happening now? Now you're being called on your shit, right? Now is the time. And if you fail in that moment, why would they ever believe a word you ever say again? They might pay you lip service. They might even, on a conscious level or on a surface level, think that they trust you. But deep down, you are not even gradually eroding that trust. You are demolishing the foundation of their trust. You are taking a jackhammer to that foundation and you are destroying it. That's the bigger picture right there, is that it bleeds into every decision you will ever make. My father to look after me. Why would I trust him when he said he doesn't believe this man is right for me? This man might be a little bit violent sometimes, and my father says he's not right for me, but I can't trust my father. Has historically shown me he doesn't want, he won't do what's best for me. Why is what he's saying now true? He must be lying. Paul, jump in.
Yeah, and there's a flip side to that as well. Like what we're talking about here, the father's protective role. I thought I'd bring this home with a bit of a personal story that I was reminded of listening to you talk there. I have an early memory of a family holiday to the UK. This would have been in the 90s. And it was my father and mother and myself and my younger brother, and we were boys at the time, and we were watching the changing of the guard at Buckingham Palace. I don't remember anything else about that trip. In fact, I have very few childhood memories for various reasons, but this one is ingrained. We were in the crowd there, and we had quite a good position at the front to watch the changing of the guard. And my younger brother was up at the front of the fence or whatever it was to get a good view. And this other man started pushing him aside and getting his own son in there. And he was quite a large man, much larger than my father. And I watched my father's reaction. He was upset. He got upset that this other man was pushing his son aside so that he could no longer see the guard. And my father never swore. One of the things that I admire about him, one of the few things I admire about him, actually, to be honest, from my childhood. But I saw this smaller man, my father, take exception to something that was happening to his son and speak up about it. He said, "Get out of the way, you stupid man," which for my father was quite the profanity. He didn't whinge to a cop about it. He didn't go grab some other authority figure and beg to have this other man who just, muscled his way in. He took custody of that situation himself and asserted himself for his son. Now that's seared into my memory. And it was perhaps one of the only times that I felt genuine pride in my father for all of his faults. I remember that time, and I've been back to the UK since, and that, I've seen the location that happened, and I still think of it now. So there's a flip side to what you were discussing there about the absolute abolition of any trust or authority that you may have over your children throughout their whole adult lives. Equally, if you do stand up for something principled in the defense of your family when they're young, there's an admiration and respect that comes from that, despite many other failings oftentimes, that is also carried through for an entire lifetime. And I just think that's a trophy that's too valuable to be sacrificed on the altar of cowardice.
That's an amazing story, Paul. And I think you firstly, you did a great job of segueing to a bit more of a positive tone, which I think is a great way, is a great place to actually end it. Or like just to begin the end of this space is on a much more positive note. And I mean, that story is powerful, right? And I challenge to any of my challenge to any of the other men listening is, you know, how could you have not felt, even just listening to that story like that, the fire burn a bit brighter just listening to that story? Because as you've rightfully said there, right? If I mean, I don't want to comment on your relationship with your father, but you know, it didn't sound like it was perfect. But that one instance can erase so many other bad decisions that a parent makes, right? Because I mean, realistically, we're all going to make mistakes as parents. We all will, right? It's par for the course, unfortunately. But when when you do those, there's moments, right? And there's decisions you make that are core decisions. They're core moments within a childhood. They are a test of character, not a test of, whether this is a good or bad decision or even logic. They are, your character is called into question. And now is the time to act. How you act now will blueprint your children and their relationship with you. And that moment was one of those moments where your father stepped up. Like you said, he didn't go look for some authority figure. He didn't tell you, oh, well, that's a shame, isn't it? I'm so sorry that happened. He said, no, I am the father. You are my son. And I am going to take control of this situation. I don't need anybody else to take control of the situation because you are my son and I will resolve this for you, regardless of what the perceived expense may be to me. Because he didn't know how that man was going to react. He could have been polite. He could have been quite, he could have just shrugged it off. He could have been very aggressive, right? And people can be in those types of crowds, certainly around London, right? And so these fathers of these children, these girls that are going up and saying, or even these other kids that are boys as well that are going up and saying, oh, there's pornographic content in our school, or boys are getting changed in the girls' locker rooms. Those are your moments, dads. Those are your moments. You will make, you will make or break your relationship with your children in the fires of those moments. Those are where the relationships are forged, right? And those moments will last a lifetime. They will not. They won't. They won't erase any future bad decisions you make. But they will go a long way in sort of righting the balance between the good parenting and the bad parenting. The lazy parenting and the proactive parenting. Those are the moments. Because these are the moments of your child's safety. Your fundamental role. You have dads who are quite absent in their lives, but they're working hard. They are trying their best to provide a roof over their family's head. And you will find children who grow up and say, yeah, do you know what? My father wasn't there for me. I wish I'd spent more time with him. But he was out working to provide a roof over our head. Because these roles, provider, protector, right? They are the roles. Everything else comes secondary to the roles we play. Those fundamental roles, those foundational core aspects of our being as fathers. Those are what and if we fail the tests when those character elements are tested, nothing else really matters, right? I mean, you could be very present with your children. You could spend a lot of time with them. You could do lots of activities for them. But if shit hits the fan and you are too much of a coward and you decide, oh, this is too difficult for me, what is it? What is the term everyone uses? Warm weather friends or something, or fair weather friends. If you're a father and those moments come and you fail, it doesn't matter how much time you spend with them, because they will always know when the situation turns dire, you can't be relied upon. And that is what they need you for most, is to be relied upon to do the right thing for them, regardless of cost to yourself. Is there anything you wanted to add, Paul?
I think that summarizes it beautifully, Alec. Yeah, identify and embrace your moments. Comes down to these key moments. Forge your legacy in the fires of these fundamental moments. You know, cowardice is a slow, painful death. And I was actually reminded myself of a quote from myself that I wrote in my book, actually, that I think is pertinent here. There are moments in history where people of the lesser nobility are called upon to perform feats of the greater purpose. And I see perhaps no better example of that than these parenting moments where all other manners of errors and sins can be erased, as you said before, by witnessing the strength of a father in particular standing up in the presence of his own danger for the protection of yourself. You know, that is the essence of life. And to abandon that for any justification is to not live at all. So thank you very much for what you do. It's been a really powerful space.
Oh, Paul, I mean, I don't even want to add any, I don't want to take this conversation any further. That was a beautiful sentiment to end it on. I also didn't know you had a book. So for wherever our spaces again, feel free to plug it.
I'm not about self-promotion. I'm about the message. So yeah, but thank you.
That was a beautiful sentiment to end it on, right? These are the moments. There's more than you think, but there's not that many. And if you fail in those moments, the consequences are disastrous. And I feel the videos that go around are parents failing in those moments. But thank you so much, Paul. This has been an amazing space. I've loved it. Thank you for everyone for listening. Yeah, I'm doing these every week. I have another one next week with Principal John again, sitting down again to talk AI in education. So, you know, jump on if you can. I won't ask you every week to get up at 5 a.m., Paul. But thank you everyone so much, and I'll see you again next week.
My pleasure. Until then.